Dear Hile, the mighty chicken killer. Come on. Come on. Show your father what you have, huh?
He will remember Precious. We will make him.
Hello and good old greetings to every single one of you out there, and welcome to the very first 2022 broadcast of the show where we look at games from the past, the present, or sometimes even the future and decide what their judgment is going to be. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gamessnia and welcome once again to the Gamessnia show. 2022. The year 2022. Jesus. It's insane to think that nearly 12 years ago we started getting stories about the end of the world, about a meteor crashing into the earth, and ever since then we've just been having a year story about that all the time, every single year, and it's just been one of those things to be like, it's fake, it's not gonna happen. And it's just like, they've kind of stopped that recently because, you know, we've had the pandemic going round, which obviously is one thing we fucking hate more than anything in the world, and we want to stop. Please let this be the year this fucking ends. But instead of talking about that, how about we talk about something positive? Something that actually has got no negativity towards it, mostly at all towards it. Let's talk about Lord of the Rings. Now, I'm going to be real with every single one of you out there. I have never watched Lord of the Rings.
Oh, just go fuck off.
Okay. Since last November.
Oh, fuck you.
Okay. Since last November. Because last November, I managed to start watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, I had been watching it for a while, mainly just because, you know, it was never my thing. Fantasy things are never my thing. Dungeons and Dragons, RPGs and all that, like, all that type of stuff, that's a poor way of explaining it, I know, but, like, all that type of stuff, like Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit and all the fantasy stuff, I'm not really a fan of it. I've never really been a huge fan of it, and to be honest, even after watching all the Lord of the Rings films, I probably never will be. And you'd think with a franchise as huge as Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit as well, because obviously I had a prequel for that, which yes wasn't overly praised and it wasn't really loved by a lot of people, but some people still enjoyed it, and I haven't watched it myself, and I'm going to this year, don't worry, but I've never seen a big Lord of the Rings game, so I looked into it obviously, and there's not actually a lot. I was very surprised by that, because big franchises like that always get capitalised on. You know, Marvel's been capitalised on, Terminator's been capitalised on, Rocky's been capitalised on, so why hasn't Lord of the Rings? I don't get that as well, because there's so much mythology and so much potential and creativeness behind developers you could do with a Lord of the Rings game. Imagine a major big Lord of the Rings game with an open world sort of thing, with choice-based stuff and all this, and you could create your own type of like creature in the universe. You know, it could be a hobbit of some sort, or it could be a wizard. Like, I'm just thinking, there's so much potential for a Lord of the Rings game, but there's just nothing to it. And the only instance of that I've seen is with the Shadow of Mordor series. And yes, the Shadow of Mordor series encompassing Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, those aren't exactly like Lord of the Rings, but they're heavily influenced as they take place in the same world. But obviously I've heard some things that, like, it's not canon, it's not going to be involved in the story because there's like a couple of confusing things, and mainly because the developer stated that this is not part of the Lord of the Rings original canon. So obviously there's that, but I kind of see that as a good thing. And plus, I want to go all the way back to Shadow of Mordor, because that is a game I touched for like 10 minutes in my life, and just gave it back because honestly I just didn't have the chance to even play or finish it, and that is really annoying me because I really want to tie up a loose end on that front. So why don't we go ahead and jump straight into Shadow of Mordor and continue the journey that I left off 6 or 7 years ago.
But even when I say that now, how long has it really been? Like 5, maybe 6 years since I last touched this? I mean, I got grounded that week, so as you can imagine, that was a fun and absolutely soul-destroying week for me. The whole beginning tells us of a story very similar on that of Tolkien's work, describing to us our role to play and the darkness of once defeated Dark Lord. No, not you. Sauron, the Ringmaker, the Lord of the Rings himself, the one and only Lord of Mordor, the pure base master of treachery, the ring. Holy fuck, how much names does this guy have? But you know, it's not important to know of him too much, just a tiny little bit. It's nothing crucial to worry about. It's not like he's the ultimate endgame to the world of Middle-earth, or maybe the bringer of destruction to all beings that was set up during the course of several movies that took so long out of our time as one of the biggest movie trilogy experiences, said about an elf that has turned evil centuries ago and crafted the most corruptible artifact / weapon in fantasy movie history that practically meant his death was never the end and could corrupt anyone that owned or wore said ring, so much to the point that it was spent in a set of 3 movies trying to destroy it, as it could never be broken or destroyed, that as you can imagine took up some of the best 9 hours of our fucking lives, had one of the best climactic finales to a series that's ever been told, with our said hobbits nearly failing the mission, ultimately causing the whole destruction of Middle-earth and dooming virtually everyone from the rule of the Dark Lords. Making it a near 4,000 years of Sauron existing in this fantasy world. So yeah, like I said, no big deal. But it's funny, it's not mostly about that. I mean, yeah, this is a Lord of the Rings game set in the Lord of the Rings universe, making this game already interesting enough with its mythology and potential, but it's also non-canon, which if you don't know what that means, look it up in the dictionary, you illiterate swine. I mean, the story of Shadow of Mordor jumps in immediately and follows the tale of a ranger of Gondor named Talion, and tells us in the immediate beginning of the game his life story through these flashbacks of memories of his training with his only son, his relationship with his wife, the Black Gate invasion, and the Black Hand of Sauron murdering Talion and his family.
Wait, what did I say?
And the Black Hand of Sauron murdering Talion and his family.
No. Fuck me, that was quick.
So, you die. Sorry, I'm still trying to process that. Talion is then brought back to life, once possessed by a wraith named Celebrimbor? I don't know. With the goal of Talion avenging his family by finding the captains responsible for the lowest point in his life, and to also help the wraith remember his past and connection to the Dark Lord by traversing the wastelands of Mordor to find the answers you so desperately need and what dark secrets lay ahead in your journey. And you know, may I just say right off the bat, this game already gives me the sense of borrowing gameplay aspects from other AAA games, of literally just, well, anything. The combat is basically the near exact same as the Arkham games, with the whole press square to attack and triangle to counter system, with occasional double button prompts for certain special moves once your streak reaches a certain number. And I think we all know that this system is solid, and while there is a bit more to it than just simply just that, I prefer to save that talk for a bit later. And the movement is straight out taken from Assassin's Creed, but honestly just a little bit less messier and clunkier in certain departments than games in the franchise up until Unity, or hell, even Black Flag. And it's just never a problem when climbing surfaces, which is something clearly Ubisoft has had troubles with recently. Oh dear. You even get these towers scattered across Mordor, which can be activated and can enable fast travel or maybe change the time of day, which also updates your map, showing you points of interest such as side missions and other forms of collectibles that will appear properly on your map once you activate the tower for that specific region. Now, where oh where have I seen that one before? But you know what I've actually not seen before? That, pardon my language, I fucking love in Shadow of Mordor? The Sauron army system. This is a game where the main themes of it are revenge and mystery, so in order to fully find your way up to the masterminds behind the death of you and your family at the start of the game, you have to hunt down countless captains that you can discover by interrogating other orcs to discover their locations as well as their strengths and weaknesses, which surprisingly varies all the time with nearly every single captain that you encounter through the Sauron army system. A good example is that they could be a combat master making normal one-on-one fights an impossible scenario to win at, so stealth kill them. Or it could be a simple captain who can be scared by beasts, which can weaken them, making it that much more easier to interrogate them and kill them, and all of them can lurk anywhere as much as they want. Sometimes can even feel like some are actually following you. And the one thing I was surprised by, which now that I think about it, it's so bloody stupid of me to think it's the best thing to take away from the system, despite everything else that is awesome about it, is actually how pretty much every single captain slash war chief all have this epic name and title to them that all seem unique and amazing to read back to yourself when playing. And no, you didn't hear anything wrong there. I said war chief. You may struggle with a captain sometimes, or hell, even most of the time, and that is a completely natural thing, but the war chiefs are the ones you have to be ready for. It's the fact that these fuckers have very strong armor, have fucking armies ready on command to mutilate your ass, and are invulnerable to so many goddamn things that will honestly scare you upon belief of the first time you fight one, which ultimately will lead to your eventual defeat.
But you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, I'm dead now, it's a game over, I can just try again later, right? There's no consequences, there's no punishment towards me because I died and I ultimately failed in my mission in defeating the war chief slash captain. Yeah, there's no problem at all, I can just try again later, right? Well, guess what? You're right! Except you're fucking wrong!
Dying is the last thing you want to happen. If you ever die from one of these captains, or even worse, the war chiefs, they will grow in power, some will even be promoted even higher, or possibly the biggest blame on your shoulders is when your death can create new powerful captains, and that's the worst feeling ever. So death is very important to Shadow of Mordor, which I love. A death is always meant to feel like a punishment in a game, like a big deal, and that's exactly what it feels like here. It gets treated what it's like in real life. I mean, what type of life would it be if death was not that big of a deal? With all the happiness, full love as we can embrace our lives and all together. But why? What's the point of the system? Why implement it in the first place? This is a system that can, yes, dominate a whole lot of the game and where a lot of your gameplay time can go, and has very little to do with the story missions except when you have to hunt down specific captains or take down all the war chiefs at a certain point in the game to fully advance in the story. But other than that, why bother? Well, this game has a power tier system, and the more captains you eliminate from Sauron's army, the higher your power tier becomes, which in turn unlock new abilities you can spend upgrade points on to help you in combat much better. And this is fully needed, as progression in this game is a must. Unlocking new abilities are something you really need to keep spending on, but also at the same time, take the time to spend it on upgrading your attributes, such as things as your health, by completing these little side missions, which I'll be honest, are maybe a tad bit shallow and bare bone in terms of your objective to fulfill. Stuff like stealth kill this amount of guys, or save these amount of slaves in this amount of time, or every so often kill this amount of people in the selected area in the allotted time limit. See, they just feel like they are just there. You can also collect tons of runes after defeating captains, and what types of runes you obtain can vary when you exploit a certain weakness of a captain, and adding these to your weapons will give them specific buffs and advantages in combat, like added damage percentages, or chances of getting bonuses and status effects in combat scenarios, or maybe add runes to your dagger to help bonuses reach out to your stealth kills, such as bonus XP gained from stealth attacks, or maybe bonus damage is added to your bow when dealing headshots. The possibilities are absolutely endless the more runes you collect. It's really neat stuff actually. I like to basically think them as a big drop you'd get from any RPG game that is your reward for taking down a certain captain, and the bigger the power of the captain, the more epic the rune can be for your selected weapon. And yes, you can have more than one for each single weapon thanks to the upgradable attributes I talked about earlier. I just loved collecting every single rune that I could come across upon killing every single captain. It just felt oh so satisfying every single time. It's almost as if we like being rewarded after accomplishing something. No Man's Sky. Not nothing after trying to go through all that shit just to discover there was nothing at the center of the fucking universe, you trolling, lazy, uncreative bastards.
Okay, I'm sorry. Alright. I know No Man's Sky is now a great game and is played by a lot of people now and is a very enjoyable one at that, but I still can't forgive them for that ending. That still was the biggest dick thing developers ever done to a gamer.
But after only just an hour of gameplay, there's already a Lord of the Rings character being brought into the story, and I think it's safe to say from this footage alone, we all know who it is. Anybody in their old grandma's shoes knows who it is. And I will say that while there are no other big returning characters, there is in fact little subtle mentions like this that make you maybe a slight bit giddy inside. Or maybe that's just me and my love for references to movies and video games. I mean, when you show me the name Saruman, I'm anticipating the arrival of the all-powerful wizard, and my expectations are now an all-time high, and of course, why wouldn't they be? I'm obviously going to be disappointed where Christopher Lee as Saruman doesn't show up, because it is, after all, Christopher motherfucking Lee. Oh, Christopher. Why? Why did you have to leave us like that? You truly weren't the greatest. Everyone's just actors for money and fame these days, but you truly cared. Even Charlie in the chocolate factory you cared about. The day you left, I swore I'd never eat another lollipop again. And I did it all for you. I did it because of you. And the story is, it's nothing to do with Tolkien's artful storytelling in his books, and it definitely doesn't feel like it at all. So obviously it's not gonna feel as well crafted as those stories, but dude, come on! It's a fantasy world! Story is like one of the three main things that you need to nail the strongest with a genre. For a game based on that genre, what a lackluster ride. Like, I enjoyed all the Rafe past flashbacks, seeing what his past was like. They were very interesting to see, especially the connection that Rafe has to the Dark Lord Sauron. But that was kind of it for me. It's a basic story of just finding the top captains and killing them with no true blockades or twists. And the missions leading up to this is just learning missions, teaching you different abilities. And there are some main missions where you help other people and build upon some relationships, but that's about it. It's just lacking for a game that's built in this fantasy world. It's just lacking on overall narrative most of the time and never really properly kicks off the ground. And the only characters that really are interesting and matter are maybe the main two characters and the villain, perhaps. But even that, he gets about maybe 5 minutes of screen time in the 20 hours you spend in this game, which doesn't extremely bother me, surprisingly. But the thing that does bother me the most is that you don't actually get a proper boss fight with him in the end, and it just kind of makes everything you've been building up to that certain point kind of just fall flat right into the dirt. So is it the same story with the combat? Well,
it's very good. Really, very good. No, please, go on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I stated earlier it had that basic style of Arkham games with pressing square for combos and pressing triangle to counter attacks, with occasional double button prompts for special takedowns, and delivering ground takedowns to incapacitate your enemies. So it's all the same type of feeling here, but it is, I said, just a bit more to spruce things up. Combat in the game, to me at least, felt a bit more faster and punishing in certain areas, with counter windows seeming very limited and quick reactive. And not only that, but to mention also, you have the ability of slowing down time with your focus, enabling you to kill enemies and blow barrels up, and activating any other point of interest in the environment, which is one of the many abilities you acquire with the power of the Wraith. And there's tons other abilities to unlock that honestly need to be bought if you want to stand a chance so much more in combat. I mean, you'll start off the game relying on stealth a lot, like a lot, because of how underpowered you start off as and how much more enemies can swarm one area in a sudden second. Expect these types of fights quite a bit, where you are surrounded by orcs everywhere with very little room to breathe. And please, for the love that is holy of God, don't let any orc raise the alarm in strongholds, because if you're too late in stopping them from setting it off, you could just kiss your chances of killing everyone in the area goodbye. Just run. Just run far, far away. Because once that alarm is raised, the waves of orcs will not stop. And these waves are filled with every types of orcs imaginable that you get through the entire game. The only time in the game you should not worry too much about these alarms is maybe when you've unlocked the last tier abilities you get in the game, because then you actually have a more chance to come out alive, especially when you obtain the most overpowered ability in the game, the Shadow Strike. I'm not even joking when I say that this ability you unlock is probably a game changer. It literally changes your entire mindset on the gameplay, and once you buy the Shadow Kill ability attachment to it, you will probably never die again in the entire game. The only real downside to it is you pretty much need to keep your arrows filled up the entire time, or you won't be able to use it. But even that isn't that worrying, as you can just find arrows lying around the area, or get more arrows from draining orcs. But up until this point of even getting close to obtaining the Shadow Strike, I would say this game is frustratingly hard on a very, very ridiculous level, and should never be taken lightly the first time you play it.
And I actually really like that and nearly every single ability you get through the game, whether it's from some of the tutorials you get in the game, like when you get new missions and all that, or when you buy them through the abilities menu, like upgrade points and all that, when you do that, nearly every single abilities feel legit and feel properly useful in a lot of scenarios. Even though some abilities may be only used for one scenario, and even just for that scenario, it's really good. Like, yeah, the whole boost, the run boost system where you jump over rocks automatically and it gives you a speed boost if you time the X button correctly. That's cool. That's not really needed, but when you get that ability, it makes it so much easier when running through fields and all that, trying to get to your next objective, other than just fast travel all the time. It's really cool, and practically nearly every single ability has a use, and I absolutely love that. Even to give that a little pause on that front, I absolutely love every single ability. And I said nearly every single ability. There's just one I absolutely hate.
And that ability is Poisoning Grogs, which is probably the most useless ability I have seen out of the entire 20 hours of gameplay I've done so far. It's just the fact you have so many other abilities for stealth that you can use instead, as they are just so much more simpler to use and are not, let's be honest, a complete hassle to use. I think I only used the ability once in the entire game, and that was when I learnt it in the tutorial mission. And I just never used it ever again because it was that useless. And that was a funny thing as well. There's an instance where you are introduced to a new enemy type, which isn't too unusual, as this happens a lot of the time and it actually serves a good purpose. But imagine you get introduced to an enemy type only to never encounter it ever again. That's what this fucker's story is. The Ghoul Matron gets introduced as this new enemy to fight in this cave encounter, and I shit you not,
never again.
Thank you, game. Thank you for introducing an enemy that has so much stuff to watch out for and is a pain in the ass to deal with, only to make me realise this never happens again. You know, there's so much more to this game than I could ever fit into a 30 minutes or less review about it before I feel like I'm dragging on with my words, so I'll give a few last points before I make my peace with it. We discover another explorable land to activate all the towers in and fully explore, and that in turn having its own Sauron's army menu with all new captains and war chiefs to go after, which adds so much more length to the gameplay time, and probably the only place where I could say on how lovely the visuals can be, with the shunts showcasing the beauty of this world that we never fully got to see in the first half of the game. More new interrogation methods surface, such as death threats and command, with death threats enabling us to get more epic ruins when killing future captains and increase certain power levels. Command is also neat as well, as you can take control of captains to force them to become bodyguards of war chiefs, which makes eliminating them so much more easier than before. And even though it was introduced in the last hour, making it seem like a last minute inclusion, I still thought it was a great thing that they added in. And through so much branding, killing, and upgrading, our disappointing final battle approaches. Like seriously. He's the most built up out of all the three big guys in the beginning. And this is what I get?
Disappointed!
And just as the dust settles, with the Wraith knowing more about his past, and the Black Hand finally being eliminated, Talion can now rest as his revenge is now complete, and Sauron has finally been destroyed. For now.
But where can I place this game on the enjoyment scale for a game that I have not played since 5 or 6 years ago? And I actually can't remember actually myself. I know it was in high school, I just can't remember how many years it's been since I've actually played this game. It's probably been more than 6 years, but I'm thinking it's 6 years. But where does it rank on my enjoyment? I really absolutely love the combat, even though it is basically the premise of it is basically Arkham's combat, which is not a problem, but obviously a lot of games nowadays have that combat system. But honestly, Shadow of Mordor, I'm actually alright with it, coping it, because it just takes the basic premise of it, but it also adds on other features. So it's like I said, the focus, like, you know, old bow and arrow, L-shot focus thing going on, that's really cool, I like that. It's a nice feature. Plus it adds stealth is a bit more cooler in regards, because you've got different types of stealth attacks, like Brutalize, where you can scare other opponents away. I love that, I actually think that's cool as shit. I actually use the Brutalize stealth kill a bit more than the actual normal stealth kill, because Brutalize can just scare your enemies and all that, and that's pretty cool, and I really like that. I love Sauron's army system, I think it's absolutely amazing. And I've seen Shadow of War gameplay as well, and I'm glad they keep this feature. It's probably the one feature that makes it very unique to other games, and it's really fucking cool. Spent a lot of time with it, and like just the way the whole system works, the whole I mentioned, yeah, it's so cool. I love it. I absolutely love it. The story is bare bone. I said this in this review. It's very bare bone, and it doesn't really add anything to the enjoyment, because it's just not, it's not good. I'll be honest, it's really not good. It's very bare bone. It's not shit, but it's not good either. Like, it just kind of happens, you know. It just, you don't feel too invested in it, and the only characters you do feel invested in is Talion and the Wraith, Celebrimbor or whatever is, I can't remember, Celebrimbor or whatever. I can't say that name, I really can't. That's a fucking hard name for me to say. The whole gameplay aspect of it is great, but the whole narrative and the story side of it, it's just a no. It's really, really good. And I would just say, for the sake of it, play the game for the gameplay. It upsets me the story is not good, honestly. I play games for story, I always have. But considering the story in here is very bare bone and very minuscule to pay attention to, it's just not a good thing. Especially for something such as fantasy. It should be a big story, but it's just not. And that honestly kind of upsets me, I'll be honest. Really does upset me, and I'm very upset that was the case. But nevertheless, it's still a very, very enjoyable game with some aspects that feel dated but still hold up to this day. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that has been today's broadcast of the Gamessnia show of Shadow of Mordor, and I'll hope you enjoyed today's Gamessnia show episode. And until the very next broadcast, guys, I will see you all in the very next Gamessnia show episodes. And until then, guys, as usual, Gamessnia signing off.